What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the PFF NFL show here on location in beautiful Mobile, Alabama for the 2025 Senior Bowl. Trevor Sikkema, Dalton, Wasserman, Max Chadwick here with you guys. I love the three-man weave that we got going on here. You guys normally hold it down on the college show. Dalton and I do the NFL show. Now for this event, we're on the road. We're fully remote. We're on location. I'm excited to talk a little ball here with you gentlemen. How you guys doing?
Fantastic. I mean, you couldn't ask for better weather, first of all. So
Very
it's a great
true.
day to be out here
Very
watching
true.
both of these practices for each teams and, you know, getting through the entire week with a lot of talented players down here, right? I mean, at every single position, I think there's a lot of intrigue and a lot of movement up and down people's boards because you have so much talent. There's a lot of depth in this draft, and I think you have a lot of guys who are in between rounds right now who a lot of people are intrigued with.
Max, how are you feeling? It's the first Senior Bowl for you, right?
First Senior Bowl
you
ever.
Drinking water through a fire hose? You just trying to take it all in?
I'm drinking a lot of water right now. I packed very heavy clothes thinking it would be very cool like Cincinnati, and it is not been very cold at all. It's been beautiful out right now.
It really has. I mean, shout out to God. Great weather here. We're going to keep it going the next 2 days. I'm manifesting it right here, but it was great. I mean, the weather set up some fantastic play that we saw on the field here. We're going to have 3 standout players from each of us. So 9 total that we're going to give you guys here on this show. And we're going to do this every single day after all of the practice here. And there's a lot of different ways that we can do this. Sometimes it can be trench players. Sometimes it could be like a one-on-one rep. Sometimes it could be like a team rep, more like a run defense. Maybe it's okay. I saw a flash to this player. It was a little bit different than what I saw on tape, but we're just going to try to make it standout players one way or another. Who is standing out? Normally it's certainly day one. It's certainly who's standing out in a good way, but we'll have the bigger conversations about a lot of these players. And Dalton, I want to start with you as we kick off this show, because when we're talking about pre-show planning, we're like, all right, who's going to talk about quarterbacks? And Dalton, you were like, I'll do it. I will do it. I will be the one to talk about quarterbacks here. So we had the chance to look at a lot of different quarterbacks here. Dylan Gabriel, Riley Leonard, Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, Seth Hennigan, like a lot of quarterbacks here that had the opportunity to showcase their talents here on day one, stand out early. Is there a quarterback amongst that group that you think had the best day one here at the Senior Bowl?
I think the best one for me, because I was really looking at this second practice with the American side, where side by side we get to see Riley Leonard, Jalen Milroe, and Jackson Dart.
Yeah, good group.
They're very polarizing prospects, all 3 of them, right? With Milroe with the athleticism, and Jackson Dart with the system he comes from, but he is talented. And Riley Leonard, national championship runner-up, playing in the Senior Bowl, one of 3 Notre Dame players here. I don't think there's any Ohio State players here, so he really wanted to come down and make a statement in his hometown. I don't know that I would give it an A+, but I think he was the best of that group, especially in this second
He's
practice.
warm. He's loose. He's ready. You know, like he played football like 5 days ago.
He didn't even need a
was.
break. It's like just go right from the national title game into the Senior Bowl and keep producing. But I thought he showed the best timing and accuracy of the 3. We saw Jackson Dart under center have a few fumbles, really kind of uncomfortable there, and spotty accuracy. And Milroe, I think we saw exactly what we thought we might with Jalen Milroe in that. Got a big arm. He's got the strongest arm here, no question. He's the best athlete of the group here, but struggled with accuracy, and I want to see that improve over the next 2 days. Leonard, his timing was good. He was functional in the pocket, saw the field well even through his second reads. I thought of that group especially, and Dylan Gabriel had a pretty good morning as well. I thought he was functional and was accurate as well. I just think Leonard made a little bit of a statement when you talk about being side by side with Milroe and Dart throughout this entire week. He had a good first day.
And he wasn't the main attraction either. That's what I was really impressed by was, you know, Riley Leonard was the guy that not a lot of people were excited about to see here, right, with Jalen Milroe here and Jackson Dart here, and he was most consistent out of all of them. And I think, like you mentioned before, he played football a week ago in the national title game. For him to come out here and perform like that in the Senior Bowl, I also was very impressed with
You know, I think that Riley Leonard's a really great shout-out. I did want to touch on Jalen Milroe because you mentioned, like, this is a really big week for him. If he was able to come out here and just showcase some consistent accuracy, some consistent throws, it was going to go a long way because over the last couple of weeks, we've even heard that teams, you mentioned polarizing guys, teams are very split on Jalen Milroe. You ask some teams, they'll tell you he's like, I don't know, a third-round pick, maybe a mid-round guy, maybe an early day 3 type of a player. Some other teams might say, yeah, we're going to take a chance on the tools. We take a chance on that guy in the first round. The interesting thing with Jalen Milroe to me is not only did it feel like more of the same with some inconsistencies on day one, the measurements. He's got small hands, like below 9-inch hands. And remember, there was the big fuss about, Joe Burrow. He had the small hands. He had the 9-inch hands. Like, oh, can he grip the football? And obviously, like, Joe Burrow has sort of figured it out with, the timing and just how he throws the ball and everything. So it's not always a kiss of death, but for Milroe specifically, his 8 3/4 inch hand size, which is just second percentile for the NFL, it matters to him specifically more than I ever thought it meant for Burrow, because Milroe's throwing power comes so much from him being just a twitched up athlete.
Yeah.
So that throwing motion is so fast, like it's so athletic and speedy that it makes sense that the ball placement, the accuracy is a little bit off with him, because he's got such a twitched up throwing motion, but he can't grip the football as well as some other quarterbacks can. And to me, even outside of what I saw on the field, it was sort of that realization that I went, oh man, this might be something that he just struggles with his whole career because of how fast his throwing motion is and how he isn't totally able to palm the football the way you would want to for that control.
And his base isn't always consistent either. That's what I was noticing out here too. His footwork wasn't the best, and something that Dalton and I were talking about all season with him is that he needs to see it before he throws it, and the anticipation just wasn't all the way there with him too. So I think that's a great point by you that, yeah, some of that accuracy issues could be stemming from that small hand size.
Yeah. So
Timing is the big word that you mentioned there. It just felt like there's times too where he's a beat late from the other two guys. Even when you watch Milroe and maybe Leonard throw it side by side, it's just a half beat a little bit later, and you need to be on time in the NFL. You mentioned Burrow. There's nobody in the NFL with better timing than Burrow. Milroe needs to find that timing with his receivers over the next 2 days.
Yeah, so obviously has the next 2 days to continue to improve that. And that's the case for everybody, right? Everybody is in a situation where, they're coming into a brand new environment. They're playing with players that they've never played with before. And so, like, all of that goes into it. And it goes into it for Milroe just as much as everybody else. It's not like, I don't mean to necessarily single him out and say, oh, he was struggling way worse than anybody else. But the context is important because that's what we're looking to see from him, that consistency. So we sort of laid the baseline of what we saw from him as a lot of sort of what the good and the bad that we saw at Alabama. These next 2 days, I think, are pretty big for him to be able to stand out there. Jackson Dart, very intriguing player. A lot of people have a lot to say about Jackson Dart. Some people think that he's one of the top 5 quarterbacks in this class. Other people think that he's not even in the top 10. It kind of depends on how much you believe in him, independent of Lane Kiffin's scheme at Ole Miss. Today, I thought Dart had some nice throws, but I think the thing that really stands out is at this event, coaches purposefully put you in situations that you're not used to.
Oh, yeah.
And they put Jackson Dart under center. And he had a couple of plays where fumbled the snap here. It was just like he didn't necessarily have the timing right in other areas. So that to me was also very interesting about the quarterbacks.
No, absolutely. I think you mentioned it, putting him in diverse situations, right? He's not going to play in the shotgun 100% of the time in the NFL, right? And it's going to be a lot different. There were a couple of nice vertical throws. There was one to the corner that was fantastic, but it was inconsistent. The accuracy wasn't quite as erratic as Milroe, but it was kind of spotty, especially early on. It's almost like maybe he felt the nerves a little bit, but you mentioned it. Got to get used to getting under center this week because it's going to be a theme in the NFL.
That's the big problem with Dart for me, is that the Ole Miss offense, the Lane Kiffin offense, I don't know how much translates to the NFL level, honestly, right? So now you see him in a system like this, he's kind of like a ball of clay. I like the tools that he's got, and I think there is something there with Jackson Dart. He's worth drafting, absolutely. But the problem is, like you're seeing it now, like an NFL type of offense, there's some stuff he's got to work through for sure.
He's another guy, day 2, day 3, and even a little bit in the game. I think a lot of scouts and NFL teams take more away from the practice than the games necessarily, but next 2 days going to be big for those two guys. I'm excited to see what they're going to be like. Max, who is your first guy that stood out here today?
You mentioned before how Dart was put in uncomfortable situations. One guy who was also put in uncomfortable situations was Tez Johnson, I think, out here. And in a standout in a bad way.
Oregon wide receiver.
Wide receiver. Sorry, yes.
I am bad at that on NFL Stock Exchange, so I've been yelled at enough to where the people are being like, what school and position? Like, I got to know. So Tez Johnson, wide receiver.
Oregon wide receiver, former Troy wide receiver as well. But Tez Johnson, stand out in a bad way at the weigh-ins, right? He came in at 156 pounds and be tied for the 3rd lightest ever by a wide receiver.
Yeah.
Tutu Atwell and Aaron Lockett were only ones lower, and they were a pound lighter than him. So not great in terms of weigh-ins. Trevor, you mentioned before how Dart was put in uncomfortable situations by putting him under center. Tez Johnson, I saw immediately, they put Azaria Thomas on him in press coverage, and I winced. I was like, okay, this is not going to go well for Tez. He beat Thomas on multiple reps against press coverage. He was physical at the stem in his routes as well. He broke his ankles on one of these reps. He's an extreme outlier due to his size, but you see the route running chops. He just gets open. He gets it. And, yes, again, 156 pounds, not great, but I still like Tez Johnson a lot, and he showed why he's been such a great football player for Oregon the last couple of years.
I went through the wide receiver rankings, the early wide receiver rankings for NFL Stock Exchange, and I remember looking at Tez Johnson. I was like, okay, I am going to have this player about as low as I possibly can. He doesn't feel like an NFL player. He doesn't look like an NFL player. but he kind of plays like an NFL player, right? And it's just right when you want to close the door on this guy because he absolutely fails the scouts off the bus test, right? Because he doesn't look like an NFL player. He's getting open against future NFL corners. So I think that
press man corners too.
It is something to note, and I'm glad that you shouted him out there.
That's big time. I think the most dangerous part for me with Tez Johnson is the top of his routes are fantastic, right? That rep you mentioned against Xavier Thomas, he gets to the top of that crossing route and just absolutely explodes out of it. You see that he's a natural middle of the field separator. That's where he's going to live in the NFL. And I'm sure if somebody were to ask him, hey, how do you get over being 156 pounds and doing this, he would just go, well, I've always done it. So, you know, those guys, they always say that I've always done it. I'm going to do it my way. And yeah, there's still going to be strength questions. We know that, but you see less press in the slot, right? And you want to see him in these situations. We know what kind of player he is. We know what his feet can do. He just has to get out here and continue to be physical. But it was impressive today from him.
My first guy that I want to bring to the table, North Dakota State offensive lineman, Zabel. He was incredible. So this was the first practice that we were watching. It's American team, right? I think it's the American team. I can't remember who the first one was. National went first.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. We're still making sure that we get him here. It's a detail that doesn't really matter here. It was the first team, the first practice. So, you know, we're here. We're sort of taking it all in. We're really enjoying it. And the first practice, it can often be a warm-up. And especially when it comes to the one-on-one drills that everybody loves so much, a lot of times, specifically with O-line and D-line, the drill itself is set up for D linemen to stand out, but certainly day one. These offensive linemen, one, they have no help. They're always on an island, no matter whether they're a center, a guard, whatever. It's a true one-on-one matchup, so you have that's going against you there. And then also, you don't know these edge rushers. You don't know who you're going up against unless you really got to it in the film room and figured out who you were going to go up against, and you've been at it the last couple of weeks. You've never really gone up against these players. And so it's a drill that certainly day one you think the defensive line is going to own. Zabel is somebody who played offensive tackle over the last 2 years at North Dakota State. And like Cody Mock in the past that we have seen from that school go to the NFL and be more of an interior offensive lineman, now finding a home at guard for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they immediately moved Zabel to center to start out, sort of in the warm-up period. But then in the one-on-ones, he played center, he played right guard, and he played left guard. Back to back to back. Not totally in succession, but very quickly within that drill, and he won at every single spot. I don't think I saw him lose a rep in the one-on-one period. Unbelievably impressive. This is somebody who had an elite overall blocking grade this past season. He's built much more like a guard in the NFL than an offensive tackle, but you're seeing here how he is playing at guard, how smart he is, how good his footwork is, the hand strength, the grip strength, just like vice grips. The core is unbelievable, and you see why he was able to succeed at tackle because of just how good of a damn good interior offensive lineman he is going to be. So, Dalton, you and I have talked about this a little bit for this draft class. The interior offensive line in general, not great. It's just not as star-studded as it has been in years past, specifically at the center position. We're waiting for somebody who is going to be center one in this class. I'll tell you, it's Zabel. And I can pretty confidently tell you that even after one practice because of how well he was playing.
And to step up from the FCS level, and I was impressed with his athleticism too. They were doing 9-on-7 run drills earlier before the one-on-ones, and he was climbing to the second level with ease, up to these linebackers in the run game too. If he can do that, especially in the zone blocking game that's so popular in the NFL now, he's going to have a big-time career. And again, I think he's a guy if you need a guard or a center, right? The fact that he showed that he could play all three of those spots and be effective, and especially at this level, I believe the only FBS team he played all year was Colorado way back in week 1, right? So you're talking about a guy with a bunch of talent that you just have to see it translate at this level, but against a group of talented Power 4 players. I think in the passing game and the run game, it was really impressive. The athleticism, the grip strength, like you mentioned, he locked it down in pass protection and one-on-ones. I think he is a guy, whether it's as a guard or a center, you could just call him the #1 interior offensive lineman by the end of the week.
He goes from the FCS level up to here, which is basically an all-star, just all the best Power 4 players out here. Not only that, goes from left tackle, like you said, playing on the interior too. Like everything was stacked against him in this week, and he was, like you said, one of the best performers overall.
He's a big-time standout, and I'd love to see it. I mean, he's got, in my opinion, easy top 50 pick written all over him. It's just a matter of how high he's.
Is he your top interior offensive lineman right now?
I would be pretty comfortable putting him as IOL 1 in this class. And I think Tyler Booker would probably be right behind him as that next guy in there, and we'll see sort of how it shapes out. Because there's a lot of offensive tackles that I feel like are going to get moved into the interior part of things. So certainly I think over the next month as we you know, as a group,
Milam, yeah.
continue to like build out the PFF big board and sort things out of like, okay, this guy technically listed as a tackle because he played here in college. We think he's more of an interior guy, and this event is a big deal towards seeing, and the Shrine Bowl too. These are events that you get to see these guys in different spots, but it's. I don't want to be like too premature about it, but it'd be damn hard to find an interior offensive lineman that I haven't seen yet that would be better than Zabel, because he's been fantastic. All right, we want to get to the next ones, but before we get to that, this podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Cherry Bundy. This is the performance strength that is fueling the Health Elite revolution. All sorts of natural products, no added sugar, great ingredients. The tart cherries that they're made from have the highest antioxidants for the fruits or vegetable in the world. That's a baseline there. All sorts of benefits here for these products. If you live an active lifestyle at all whatsoever, whether you're training for a marathon, CrossFit every single day, or as simple as taking a walk around the neighborhood to get your steps in, reduces soreness, increases recovery, naturally occurring melatonin to help you improve sleep. It also helps support immunity, and whether you're just somebody who casually is active, or you're somebody who's playing at the professional level and really trying to push your body to the limits, it's used by nearly 500 collegiate and professional sports teams, every single NFL team, 10 of the last Super Bowl champs, which I got to assume the Kansas City Chiefs are one of them, and probably the Philadelphia Eagles as well, given that number. So there's a chance that it's going to be 11 out of the last 12. Every game that was played overseas, in Europe, Brazil, all that stuff, these guys had Cherry Bundy with them as well to help them recover. Products are available on Amazon, cherrybundy.com, retailers nationwide. Check out like Publix, Kroger, whatever your local retailer is. They might have them there, but if they don't, cherrybundy.com. Check out all the great products. They've got products for recovery, to help with sleep, to give you a little bit of energy, all sorts of great stuff. Use the promo code PFF20 on all orders over at cherrybunny.com to get yourself 20% off. Dalton, who's your next guy we're bringing to the table? Who else stood out for you?
So Max mentioned one really good slot receiver from the national team practice this morning. I got another one. He's just one of my favorite players on either of these rosters. Miami's all-time leading wide receiver.
Let's go, baby.
Let's go, baby. And I think
Miami had a good day today.
They had a fantastic day. There's a group of Miami Hurricanes that had really good days today. But Restrepo, look, wide receiver 6 on my board right now. And I just think you could tell from the very beginning of practice and warm-ups, he was all business. There's certain guys that come in here, they're kind of anxious, right? They're a little bit nervous. There's millions of dollars on the line. There's draft stock on the line. He just came in here and played the same way he's played his entire career. Honestly, he just goes out and he's the same guy every week, and that's what you got. Again, fantastic route running, terrific releases, super competitive, and I think it makes sense that he was the guy every time the wide receivers went through their drills, first guy in the line, right?
Yep.
And he just that's what it speaks to me is his high football IQ. I think he might have the highest football IQ of any receiver in this draft. Just a guy who knows what he's doing, got open on just about every rep. I mean, even the only 2 balls I didn't see him catch, one was a deep ball that was a little bit overthrown, and those aren't usually his forte, as he's only 5'10", right? The other one was actually his last rep of the day. He run a nasty comeback. I forget who he was going against, and he just stumbled just coming out of his break, but he just burned him, absolutely. I mean, Restrepo knows how to get open, and he's not. I don't think he's going to wow us with an A+ combine. Not great size, maybe not great 40-time speed, right? Might be a 4.5 kind of guy, but the IQ, the route running, and the quickness in his feet were all on display all day. Restrepo was fantastic from start to finish.
I could have told you before we got here that Dalton would shout out Xavier Restrepo, but he earned it. Honestly, I don't think we've ever done a show on the PFF College Football Show where Dalton did not shout out Xavier Restrepo. Even like non-Miami videos, he would still find a way to shout out Xavier Restrepo. But he did earn it today. He was awesome.
Interior defensive line rankings. He's like, I want to start the show.
I think he could
shouting out a guy who
he could make it happen in there. He knows what he's doing.
He didn't make my list here with defensive tackle, but at wide receiver, I just got to talk about this guy.
He's my sleeper cornerback in this draft.
Okay. So, I mean, he could be. You'd get him in the conversation. Look, when I went through summer scouting, a handful of months ago, June, July, whatever it was, I remember watching Xavier Restrepo, and there's a handful of players that, again, they maybe passed the off the bus test a little bit better, right?
Yeah.
They're a little bit bigger, look like they're a little bit stronger, a little bit faster than him when it comes to the vertical speed, the top speed, whatever. But they don't win as consistently as he does. And isn't that what it's all about? You just want to win. Now, obviously, you want to have kind of the right mix of receiving room that you have at the NFL level to be able to threaten defenses in a lot of different ways, but it's hard to think that all 32 teams would not want Xavier Restrepo on their roster. It just kind of depends where they end up picking when it's all said and done.
Ready-made NFL slot receiver. I would take him in the second round tomorrow.
Absolutely.
What a day for the guys that are the last off the bus, right? Tez Johnson, Xavier Restrepo, Willie Lampkin.
Shout out.
All the physical outliers in the bad way all came out and were dominant, I thought, today.
Willie Lampkin, who is the interior offensive lineman from North Carolina.
Yes.
He weighed in at 270
and 5'10".
and 5'10". That's like fullback / center, type of a hybrid position, which you normally don't think about. But he was, I was very impressed. He
had some reps against Deion Walker, who is 9 inches taller and 70 pounds heavier, and he stonewalled him.
Every offensive line coach ever is clipping this and clipping that tape and going, I told you, leverage.
Yep.
Leverage is the most important part of what you do.
That's
it
natural
helps
pad
when
level.
you're born with it, yeah.
That's as
leverage,
natural pad level as you get right there.
If you have natural leverage and you got a dog in you, I mean, that is just every player that an offensive line coach wants.
Yep.
Max, who is your second player that you want to
So we shouted out a lot of underdogs here on this show. This guy was never been an underdog his entire life. He was the #1 recruit coming out of high school back in 2022, even over Travis Hunter in that class. Walter Nolen, probably going to be a first-round pick in this draft. And when you see a first-round pick out here, you want to see him dominate. I thought I saw Walter Nolen dominate pretty much every rep out here. He shocks on impact. His speed to power is ridiculous. He's coordinated. He's very powerful. Pretty solid bend, I thought, too, for a defensive tackle his size as well. Miles Frazier got discarded, I thought, in one of the reps. He looked every bit like a first-round caliber defensive tackle out here today. I mean, obviously there's guys like Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham that are going in the first round. I think Walter Nolen might be the third guy that goes in the first round from this class. And
Could be.
He looked really, really good out here today.
No, I mean, he's strong as an ox, right? I mean, like some of the run fit drills where you're not really looking to get into the backfield. It's more of the ball's being hiked, you're holding the line of scrimmage. But then, after a couple of seconds, they try to simulate the play. So, yeah, you're trying to shoot your hands inside, you're trying to extend the arms, and you're trying to sort of like peek to where the ball is. But then at the time in which you would think the running back's going to get close to the line of scrimmage, can you stack and shed?
Yep.
Can you get him to the side? And there was that one play where it was Miles Frazier, who is not a small interior offensive lineman, that it looked like it was all upper body strength. He just threw him to the side, and Miles is kind of stumbling. No shade to Miles there. It's just it catches you off guard how strong this guy's going to be.
No, absolutely. It's the continuation of a breakout we saw all season, right? Because his first 2 years at Texas A&M, like you mentioned, #1 recruit in the country, played decent football, but it wasn't quite at the elite level that they expected. He goes to Ole Miss this year. I believe he was second in the nation in run defense grade behind Mason Graham, which you already know Mason Graham's going to be the first defensive tackle taken in this draft. Nolan's been spectacular all season at Ole Miss, an elite run defender, and the one-on-ones were really intriguing because he's still developing as a pass rusher. If that continues, you're going to be talking about him as maybe a top 20 pick.
Yeah. No, I think I agree. I think that he has all the talent in the world and certainly some good run defense grades this past season. I think the run defense film was his best stuff this past season, where you get a player who is about 6'3", 300 pounds. I can't remember exactly what he measured in at this event, but he's more built like a 3-technique defensive tackle. But normally when you think of 3-techs, you think they're going to be pass rushers first, and he was still more of a run defender first. But there were times when that just natural athletic ability and explosion showed up with him getting into the backfield. So he doesn't – the pass rush plan – that's what we want to see over the next 2 days.
Yeah.
Like, do you have a little bit more in the tank, right? You sort of establish yourself today. Do you have a couple of pass rush moves you've been in the lab working on? Do we get to see a little bit of them here? That's sort of what I'm looking to see from Walter.
His pass rush plan is still winning off athleticism right now, but it was still working out here against some really good guards and centers. So that should tell you a lot, that there's still a very high ceiling he's not even tapped into yet.
Right, and that's sort of that was kind of like the Clowney thing, right? It's like Clowney never became this technician of a pass rusher that a lot of people believed that he was going to become, but very solid run defender throughout his entire career, and he was still able to win by just being Jadeveon Clowney. And so if you get Walter Nolen and what he is as a run defender, and then you just get a handful of times he'll win as a pass rusher just because he's Walter Nolen, I think a lot of teams would take that, especially with the versatility that he has to play odd, even fronts basically everywhere.
And it's enticing because he's so young, right? You've talked about this before. We have so many super seniors.
Yeah, what is he? Is he 20? Is he 20,
He's a true
21?
junior. Yeah.
So,
I mean,
something like
you have
that.
so many super seniors and seventh-year guys and guys with the extra COVID year and all that, and this guy only played 3 years of college football, right?
Yeah.
And right now we're seeing that as kind of a rarity. I mean, we've got, a guy like Tyler Shuck out here, I believe, is going on 25 years old at quarterback, spent 7 years in college football. Walter Nolen's so young, and I think there has to be some appeal to that, not even 21 years old yet, being that talented and that productive right now.
Yeah. All right, we got a couple more players that we're going to get to. Before, I got a question for everybody in chat. What does your child's success in the future look like to you? Maybe it's a job that they're passionate about. Maybe it's traveling the world, just being happy and comfortable. Could look like a lot of different things. Whatever their journey is, you can help make it easier to achieve with a kids investment account for Fabric by Gerber Life. By making a contribution to your child's future today, you can help give them the means to pursue their dreams, both big and small, whatever they are. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a kids investment account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. Kids cannot invest while they're minors, but a kids investment account allows you to invest on their behalf, gives their investment so much more time to grow. Whole thing is online. Setting up an account, very easy, could take as little as just 5 minutes, and then you just manage your child's account and monitor those investments right from your phone. Funds that can be used for anything. I mean, when they're younger, it's after school activities, sports, summer camps, things like that. And then when they're a little bit older, maybe it's you're helping them with their first car, first house, starting a business, just traveling the world, whatever it is. When they're adults, they can have plenty of benefits there as well when you start right now. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. MEET fabric.com/PFFNFL. Portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk, of course. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right. I said that it was a great day for Miami. I'm going to keep talking about Miami because their tight end looked like he's the best tight end here and might very well be tight end 3 in the 2025 NFL Draft, Elijah Arroyo. Now, he is listed on Miami's website at 6'4", like 235. He showed up to the Senior Bowl 6'4.5", 251. So like legit size. And the thing is that when you watch him at Miami, when you watch his tape at Miami, he is such a good receiver that you go, shoot, okay, at this point, I hope you're 235, right? I hope you're not kind of stretching it. You're more like 230-ish, because that's pretty low when it comes to percentiles for the NFL. Excuse me. He's 10, 15 pounds heavier than we even thought he was going to be, and that was his listed weight. This dude was out here cooking all different types of safeties, linebackers, whether it was team drills, the individual drills. He was getting open all the time. I mean, certainly the early DB one-on-one drills, he had a handful of really nice catches. He had a really nice double move up the seam, which is great to see, and it just showcased his natural athleticism there. Had a really nice fade ball into the end zone that he caught in the one-on-one period, and then the competition period, it was just him versus, I believe, a safety, and it was another, just like guaranteed catch. He was winning all day long, and it was great to see because this is somebody who, not kidding, I'm glad this happened. I'm watching as many prospects as I can from that are on the Senior Bowl list before we get here because I want to have kind of a primer of what they do and how they can get better. Arroyo was literally the last guy that I watched. I had a little bit of extra time one night, and I was like, all right, yeah, I mean, I'll watch Arroyo. I haven't really heard a lot about him, so I popped it on, and I'm glad that I did. This guy had his most productive year by far this past season, but he's got an interesting story as to why that would have been the case. So he was born in Miami, ends up moving to Mexico when he was 6 years old. So he spent a lot of his childhood in Mexico, ended up finding a youth football team because he loved football. So he continued to fall in love with the game of football growing up while he was in Mexico. Then around when he was 12, his parents then moved to Texas. So then he played high school football in Texas, ends up committing to Miami, so goes to Miami, a little bit of a full circle moment for him. Redshirts his first year, and then that second year, ends up tearing his ACL just a couple of games into the season. Was poised to be a contributor to the team, but then, he missed the rest of that year. The 2023 season, he's still just trying to get that confidence in his knee. And this past year is the first year that he's really been fully healthy, confident, ready, and this dude just knows how to win. So Elijah Arroyo from Miami, super impressed with him early on here, and genuinely, after Colson Loveland and Tyler Warren, he might be the next tight end off the board because of what he could do as a receiver.
What he showed today, I think, was even a little more expansive than he did all year at Miami, because I thought he was a great seam threat for Miami, and Cam Ward just threw him absolute lasers all season. But the way that he stacked defenders today in his routes and then waited to break off instead of rounding it off, he's right now the best route runner of any of the tight ends here, and it was very clear today. I mean, it just winning in single coverage for guys, especially like you mentioned, 251 pounds. That's usually the challenge, is making sharp breaks at that size and winning in single coverage. He was fantastic today, even honestly better than I expected him to be.
Same.
I came here not entirely sure who the best tight end was going to be. We have Mason Taylor here. We have Harold Fenton Jr. here. Somebody had to emerge. I just think he was clearly this morning he was fantastic. He was the best tight end on the field, and the ability to align in the slot, even out wide at his size, and you see that even in Miami's offense this year, he can align anywhere on the field, and if he can get himself open in his route breaks anywhere on the field, he's going to be a dangerous player.
Yep.
I think one of the biggest storylines for me heading into the Senior Bowl week was who can take hold of tight end 3. Because like you mentioned before, Tyler Warren, Colson Loveland, pretty much consensus tight end 1, tight end 2.
Yep.
Every other tight end that's fighting for tight end 3 is basically here right now, right? A lot of people would have Harold Fenton Jr. Not a great day, I thought, for him today, but Mason Taylor's here. Well, I thought Elijah Arroyo, I agree with you. I thought he was the best tight end by a good amount in today's practice, and I was blown away by him.
Yeah, no, he was fantastic. Dalton, who's your final guy that you want to shout out here today?
So I'm going to go from all the Miami Hurricanes we've talked about to a former Miami Hurricane and SMU running back Brashard Smith.
Do they get to count him still? Is that a big day for Miami?
They got
Maybe
enough.
it's a big day for Miami recruiting. You can just say it's a good day
now
for Miami
they're
recruiting.
hot recruiting the last 5 years is what's happening there. No, former wide receiver, now running back. He was with SMU this past year with Brashard Smith. When you have a Power 4 back when he leads the Power 4 in receiving grade this year, all Power 4 running backs, I expect him to come out here and light up one-on-ones, and that's the first thing we saw him do. I mean, these linebackers did not stand a chance, I think, outside of one rep where Smile Munden from Georgia held up with him. He's a dynamic player. I think he's going to be a day 3 player because he's definitely a committee back, but as a former wide receiver, the receiving skills out of the backfield are going to be essential to his success, right? And I think that's going to add to somebody's locker room a guy out of the backfield that's really dangerous and can still line up out wide if you wanted him to, because he used to do it at Miami, right? The other thing we saw in the team drills, okay, now we got to see him run between the tackles, and usually it was more of an off-tackle runner at SMU. It's a fantastic outside runner. There was an outside zone run to his left that he made a couple of cuts and broke down the left sideline. I think the more that he shows that versatility, if he can give you enough from the backfield in the run game, he's one of the elite receivers at the position in this class, maybe the best one, honestly. He was getting out of his breaks in one-on-ones. They're going to have to start covering him with safeties and corners instead of linebackers because they stood no chance at all against Brashard Smith. I think he's going to be a really fun day 3 back, a good value pick for some team in this draft.
Well, it's fun because him and I think Marcus Yarns from Delaware might be the 2 best receiving backs that we have in the class, and they're both here at this event. So you get a good look at both of those guys. I thought Yarns had a couple of good grabs today, but you're right. I mean, Smith has been somebody who's really stood out in phenomenal PFF grades. I mean, you mentioned an elite receiving grade from him out of the backfield this past year, almost an elite rushing grade as well. Had a 0.23 missed tackles forced per attempt average, which is pretty solid, and an 87.6 rushing grade. So he is definitely somebody who has stood out pretty well already. And it's tough to stand out as a running back at this event, right?
Yeah.
Because the big part of playing running back is how well you do versus contact. And so that's an element that obviously we're not getting into the mix here. But for him to be able to stand out early on, especially as a receiver, it's good for him.
Yeah, I think his footwork was just so quick today. Whether it be in the one-on-ones, even I think it was a run on duo, right, where he was dancing through the hole a couple times.
I mean,
well.
he just finds it. He's not, like you mentioned, he's not the biggest back. He's a former receiver. He's not going to run through a ton of contact, which again is why he's going to be a little bit limited to a day 3 pick. But I think as a committee back with really, really good feet in both assets, you mentioned an 87 rushing grade, I believe a 90 receiving grade that led all Power 4 backs. Just a versatile player that I think a team that already has a workhorse back in front of him, they can use him as a change of pace guy. I think you're talking about maybe even a 4th or 5th round selection if he has a full good week here.
All right, a couple more players that we had that stood out for us here on day 1 of our Senior Bowl coverage here. But before, question to everybody out there, have you played Pick 6 yet from DraftKings? Because if you haven't, what are you waiting for? You better get in on it. There's only one game left as the Super Bowl. As the official daily fantasy sports partner of the NFL, DraftKings does fantasy sports like no one else. You can play for better payouts on Pick 6. Super easy to get started. Select 2 or more players. Choose if they will have more or less of a single stat, touchdowns, rushing yards, receptions, sacks, tackles, whatever it is. Just check it out. Pick 6 available in most states. Texas, Georgia, California, Missouri, so many more. And if you've never used it before, well, it's not too late, and things might be a little bit sweeter for you, too. New Pick 6 customers, you play $5 on any set, you get 50 in Pick 6 credits. Obviously, we got an incredible matchup here between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. Saquon Barkley's just been unstoppable basically this entire season. So if you look at Saquon Barkley, you look at this Chiefs defense, and you say, no, Saquon's still going to rush all over him. Check out whatever his line is. Maybe you'll say more or less of his stat there. Talk about Jalen Hurts. He'll obviously be in the mix for one of the top impactful players. If you think it's going to be a big Jalen Hurts day, you can bet more or less of his stats. But those are just a couple of examples. You can check them out by downloading the DraftKings Pick 6 app now, using the promo code PFF. It's promo code PFF to play $5 and get 50 in Pick 6 credits only on DraftKings Pick 6. crown is yours. If you've got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problems of gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus, age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited, 1 per new customer. Bonuses awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire within 30 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. Max, who's your last guy? Who are we talking about?
I want to shout out NC State offensive tackle Anthony Belton. So
Beef.
you mentioned before how these one-on-ones, the way they're designed, inherently favor one side of the ball over the other, right? So in the one-on-ones between receivers and corners, it favors the receivers. In the one-on-ones between offensive linemen and defensive linemen, it favors the defensive linemen. I thought in the first practice we had today, a lot of the offensive linemen dominated, and Anthony Belton was one of the biggest ones, in my opinion. He buried Landon Jackson on a rep. He stonewalled Donovan Ezeraku on another one.
On the signature inside spin
Yes.
from Donovan Ezeraku. He might have watched the tape.
I think he did.
Remember we said, like, okay, you might be able to do that a couple of weeks leading up to the event. He might have watched the tape on Donovan Ezeraku.
And he came in with 36-inch arms as well. And the thing I love seeing from Anthony Belton, so when I watched him on tape, his feet are a little heavier. So I thought, okay, he might have to play on the interior. So he was great at tackle. Then they kicked him inside to interior, and he was still dominating on the interior as well.
Yeah.
So Anthony Belton, I thought, was such a good player, both at tackle and at guard in the one-on-ones. Again, in a situation where it doesn't really favor him all that much, and he was still dominating out there. He's right now projected as a 4th-round pick. I think if he keeps this up all week, he could maybe sneak into the 3rd round.
Okay. All right. I love it. I love the shout-out.
The interesting part there is you mentioned it like with Gray Zabel before, and we have other guys here like Wyatt Milan. We came down here thinking, all right, it's kind of a weak interior offensive line class, but there's still some
accepted invites to the Senior Bowl than there were interior offensive linemen, and that's because there are so many tackles that the NFL wants to see at interior offensive line. They knew that those guys would rotate in there. Anthony Belton is definitely one of them. Shout out to Julian, who gave us a super chat on the show on YouTube. Elite choice for the last standout, Dalton. And then we had Pick Spreads also say completely agree, Dalton, on the Brashard Smith shout-out. So you got a lot of people who agree with you with the SMU shout-out. Big SMU fans here in the chat, or at least big Brashard Smith fans.
Another playoff team, and I have to appreciate that. We saw a lot of guys who played in the playoff, right, even though it was a 12-team playoff, whether it was first round or all the way through the national title game. Smith, another one. They lost to your Penn State Nittany Lions, but in the playoff, short turnaround, and came in and performed really well today.
The last guy that I'm going to shout out here before we get to more of some of what you guys are talking about in the chat, because I want to scroll back and see any questions that you guys have, see if we got eyes on some of those players that you have any questions about. TJ Sanders, the interior defensive lineman from South Carolina, is my last shout out here on this show because he gave us what I think was the rep of the day, just absolutely bulldozing the LSU interior offensive lineman, Dellinger. And, oh, man, I feel bad for him because Dellinger was – this is the thing. TJ Sanders, anybody who watches tape, knows that wins with quickness, right?
Mm-hmm.
He wins with that first step. He likes to shoot the gap. He likes to, as an interior defensive lineman, you don't always have the opportunity to attack the half man. You know, when you get out to the edges, to the offensive tackle, when you're an edge rusher, you can do a really good job setting yourself up to where you can attack the half man. You want to give yourself an option to be able to attack the inside or outside shoulder. You don't want to always have to go through their chest because it's tougher for them to defend if you can attack one half of their body instead of just going straight at them. So for interior defensive linemen, though, it's harder to do that just because there's less space. Sanders is still somebody who tries his best to attack the half man on the interior offensive line. And so he's shooting a lot of gaps. You know, he uses hands to really get to your shoulder and try to get even there. And that's just how he wins. It's how he had an 87.6 pass rush grade against true pass sets this past season. He's done it for 2 years in a row. He's been really good at it. But this time, he went, nope. I'm going straight through your chest. And just the offensive lineman was not missed. He was not ready for it. So that first step, there's zero false steps to it. He is exploding off of that front foot, and he just got straight into his guy and bulldozed him straight to the ground. And that was one of the top reps. And the reason why I'm shouting it out, not only because it was a good singular rep, but also because of the context that I just said. Mm-hmm. This is a player who wins with finesse. But when you play on the interior defensive line in the NFL level, you have to play with power. Power is a prerequisite in the pros. And he measured in at 284 pounds, I think was his official weigh-in weight. That's about 10 pounds lighter than what he is listed at South Carolina. And 284 that's pretty light for an interior defensive lineman. That basically just streamlines you to you are a one-gap penetrating, three-technique defensive tackle. There's not a lot of versatility out there unless he's got a little bit longer arms, so maybe you could say that he's a 3-4, 4-eye. Maybe you could say like he's a defensive end in that regard. But he's kind of streamlined to exactly what you want him to be as a finesse player. Today he showed some power, man. He was not just in that one rep, but the whole day I thought Sanders looked like a future pro. So TJ Sanders.
You know what I have to wonder is, because obviously South Carolina played LSU this year, and then you got that same matchup in that game. We'd have to go back and see some of the specific reps. Is it something that Garrett Dellinger just didn't see in that game earlier this season?
I was going to say, when I watched TJ Sanders and I was scouting him, I did watch that game, and he tried to win with quickness all game. So to give some credit to Garrett Dellinger, he could not expect that because he went up against him already, and he goes, okay, I know he's going to try to win with quickness, and that came out of nowhere. So, yeah, that was probably the best rep of the day.
That is very true. South Carolina, best defensive line in the country this past year. Yeah, all right, hold on. You guys are the resident college football experts. I thought South Carolina had the best defensive line in the country.
It's up there. It's certainly up there. I would say Michigan, but it's up there.
I think Michigan. I could even put South Carolina probably 2 or 3. It's Michigan, Ohio
Michigan
State, and South Carolina are up there.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan had Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Josiah Stewart, Derek Moore. Yep. And then Ohio State, Tui Maloau, Jack Sawyer, Tyleik Williams. Yeah, that's.
It's certainly up there.
We lean towards Michigan, but South Carolina might be too, and they got some young guys coming back that are going to be freaks in future years.
Yeah, no, that's very true. All right, so that's all the guys that we had shouted out. I don't know if there was anybody else that you guys wanted to shout out here. There's a couple in the chat. Go ahead. I
want to shout out just Devin Jackson, who was a great reporter down here. He got a great answer from Shamar Stewart, who's one of the top prospects here. He said, "What's your favorite rep from this practice today?" He said, I told number 52, which is Logan Brown, the Kansas offensive tackle. He said, I told number 52, I'm going to run through your face, and then I ran through his face. He said, that was my favorite rep in practice. So shout out to Devin Jackson for asking that question.
You love it.
He did run through his face on that rep, I'll say. Yeah.
You can play him at corner with confidence like that. That's cornerback talk.
Yep.
That's cornerback talk right there. How did number 4, the edge rusher from Texas, look? That is
Barron Sorrell, right?
Yeah, Barron Sorrell. I only saw a couple of reps of him, but he was impressive. Like even on the bag drills early on in practice, which is so you're getting warmed up, you're getting the hands warmed up, you're kind of getting everything warmed up, getting ready for the individual drills, the one-on-ones, the full team drills. He was. I thought he popped a little bit in the little bit that I saw there. So now I gotta keep an eye on him for day 2 and day 3.
Yeah, and he's kind of acquired a name in that Texas front with so many big names: Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton, who aren't playing this week. Colin Simmons, who we'll talk about a couple years from now here too. I mean, no, Sorrell's another good player from a fantastic Texas defense for sure.
Really good bend too. I noticed that today. Okay. Really good bend from Barron Sorrell. Yeah, he had a good day.
Good shout out. David in the chat said, "Is Jay Higgins at the Senior Bowl?" He is. Wait. Jay Higgins is the Iowa linebacker.
Yes.
I don't believe
Jaden Higgins.
No, Jaden Higgins is
the
here.
Iowa State wide receiver.
Jay Higgins is not. I caught myself there. I didn't initially, but I caught myself there. No, Jay Higgins is not at the event. Jaden Higgins is at the event. Didn't have the best first day.
Yeah.
Didn't have the best first day. Now, this is somebody that I think wins with his technique. He wins with his IQ more than he wins with his just natural athleticism. So, day 2, day 3, can we see a little bit more of that savviness? Does that savviness turn into separation for him? Because I don't feel like we saw that here today.
Yeah, he didn't separate that well today. I don't think the one-on-one's really designed for a guy like Jaden Higgins. He's more of he's a really good contested catch wide receiver. Obviously, at 6'3", I think he's listed at by Iowa State. So I'm a big fan of Jaden Higgins. I thought his tape was phenomenal these past 2 years, but yeah, not the best day of practice from today.
I think the last one we have on here is just a shout out from Mike Green. Mike Green, the edge rusher from Marshall, who we had a little bit of scare there because they tweeted out initial verified measurements that I thought were this week, but they were actually from last summer, that he was 236 pounds. And I was like, oh no, that's like 0th percentile for an edge rusher. But he shows up here, he's 251. He didn't look small. He did not look small out here at all. Now, he's got a little bit shorter arms, and we saw that in the measurements, and we saw the final measurements that he had there. But he is still, he's an NFL edge rusher. There were a couple of times where he was a little bit slow off the snap, but the second that he starts going, the second that first step happens, he looks like an NFL pass rusher. Very all-around type of a dude along the defense. offensive line.
No, absolutely. I think he definitely is a guy who had moments, but I think that was a theme of the day. There was, some defensive guys who had moments. You mentioned Sanders, Nolen, Mike Green, but I think for the most part, offense won the day today, and it was odd to see on day one. And I was expecting to come here and see the defensive line dominate because there's so many talented players. Even with some of the top guys not participating here, it's the deepest position unit in this entire class, right? But the offensive linemen, especially, I thought in both practices for the most part, played really well, and they're ahead of the curve right now.
Jalen Royals, somebody asked about him. I don't know if you guys got eyes on him. I did not see him. I like him.
I believe he was in. Wasn't he in the second group that we watched? I didn't see. To be honest with you, the only guy at wide receiver that stood out to me in the second practice was Jack Betch from TCU. I thought he was.
Somebody just mentioned him.
Thought he was clearly the best wide receiver of the. Yep. I think we had a loaded group this morning with Restrepo and all the slot receivers and Higgins and Pat Bryant. It's a little lighter group, I believe, for the. We're mixing them up now. I believe that's for the American team that went second. That's a lighter group, but I thought Jack Betch was clearly the best one from what I saw.
The reason why I had a little bit of hesitancy saying that TJ Sanders had the play of the day is because Jack Betch has just climbed the ladder, full extension catch over the middle on that crossing route. Could have also very well been play of the day there. So shout out to Jack Betch for that play there. Those are the two guys that had fantastic days. All right, there we go. That's our 9 players that really stood out to us from day 1 of Senior Bowl coverage. We're going to be here with you all week doing shows after day 2, day 3 as well. And then we'll have a very special mock draft episode for you guys as well coming later this week to sort of encapsulate all of our thoughts of what we saw here at the Senior Bowl. For Dalton Wasserman, Max Chadwick, I'm Trevor Sikkema saying see you guys tomorrow.